Hello, everybody. All right, so that sounds good then. All right. Well, we already have a chat. Hey, Intentwebs, I did see you post that before the show, so thank you for that. And if you guys haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, that'd be appreciated. So Rick, how's your weekend been?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'd say long, but it's not really been long. It
Hmm.
just feels long for some reason.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I myself, I actually was for the first time in 4 years yesterday. I actually took a bus, took a bus trip yesterday.
Oh, where did you take a bus to?
Um, Down from where I live here in La Mirada down to Huntington Beach.
Ah, cool, cool, cool.
So yeah, so basically I was like, well, because basically, until I wanted to see if they had in fact relaxed a lot of that stuff where they were no longer like enforcing a mask mandate. So I was going to have to at some point. So
Ah, so did they relax it?
yeah, I did not have to wear a mask. They did not bug me about wearing a mask. So
Oh,
for
that's
now,
good.
now that's just one company though. I obviously need to do a few more to make sure that that is the case.
Yeah. Um, on a completely different note, I watched the new Quantum Leap last week. Like I had watched a few episodes before near the beginning of the season of it, but I watched the whole season. I got it and watched it.
Uh huh.
Uh, and I'm just wondering whether they're trying to make a connection between that and Stargate, because the actor of the holographic doctor from um, Voyager was in it. I forget his name. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it's real hard.
are you talking about the actor?
Yeah, the actor. The
Yeah,
actor was in
That's
it.
Robert Picardo.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Robert Picardo, who also did the voice of Amazo in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons of the
yeah.
2000s.
But as you may or may not know, Robert Picardo was in Stargate quite a few times.
Actually, I don't know because I never watched that show.
Okay, well, for those who you now know now, and for those that did, and his name in it was Woolsey, something Woolsey, Doctor Woolsey or whatever, and he was in an episode of the new Quantum Leap with the same last name.
Um. Anyways, Rick, just give me a sec here because
Yeah.
Woody still embarrassed about zapping someone in the room last week. I dropped the phone in bed and rolled onto the screen just right.
Would
Yeah,
that be just
so we've
right,
all
or
done stuff like that, like butt dialed or whatever.
uh,
That happens, right?
yeah, yeah? Would that be rolled onto the screen just right or just wrong?
I guess perspective is a bit of everything there.
Yeah. And hello, Woody. How are you? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so
Robert Picardo also played. I don't know if up in Canada you saw the Wonder Years back in the late '80s, early '90s with
it was here. I did not watch it myself.
well he also portrayed the basically the gym teacher in that in the earlier episodes.
Yeah, he was also in I think Gremlins too,
Hmm.
but he had hair in it.
Yeah. So
but
yeah, I
uh,
mean, hmm.
but I just found it interesting that he was in the new Quantum Leap with the same name, basically. Well, last name, anyways, because he would have been playing a father or grandfather or whatever of his character from Stargate.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I did watch some of back when it was on like the original Quantum Leap with
Scott Bakula.
Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell.
Yeah.
Actually, let me check because I'm not sure, but
And they do connect this new one with the old Quantum Leap, so
yeah,
I like that. It's supposed to be sort of a continuation years later.
yeah. Just with obviously with newer people.
Yeah. Well, the project in
Oh
it
yeah.
got
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. I had thought I heard like maybe a couple of years ago or so that Dean Stockwell had passed, and he did back on November 7th, 2021.
yeah, the actor of Al.
Yeah. So he was from the looks of this, I think he was 85 when he passed.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So yeah, because he was born in 1936. So um
This is the same reason I don't use power tools as Woody.
hmm, yeah. So yeah, that probably would be a thing there. Yeah. So and I think we did talk last week about the menopausal superhero, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh wait,
Either
actually,
or was that this week?
well, I probably covered this. But I wasn't sure if we talked. Actually, that's right. We didn't because we spent the whole time talking about the whole quartering
Yeah.
Matt Walsh thing.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. You went over the article earlier this week, the one with
Yeah,
Whoopi.
yeah. But I was. But anyways, again, I want to at least wait to see if we can get a few more people in because I do not I do have something that we can probably talk a little bit about without
Yeah,
having to just go over an article. This time,
yeah.
something did cross my mind the last few days here that I thought would be a good interesting conversation topic. But again, I just want to see if
Hey, Tim.
hey Tim, now we see you. Feel free to join us if you'd like. Maybe with you in here, we'll do some intros, and then I've got an idea for a topic to discuss. If you want to come in and join us for that, um, something of interest in the realm of comics. I'll just wait a sec, give him a chance to see if he wants to come in. Let's see. And if you have, and of course, as always, guys, if if you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything we talk about here tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and we will answer the questions to the best of our ability. So, anyways, we're just, as I said, just gonna wait a moment to see if
Timmy's coming.
yep,
The Timotei.
well, yeah, Timothy Olsen.
Not related to Harriet Olsen or the Olsen twins or any other Olsen that you can think of that's
Yeah,
famous.
right. Huh. All right. So, anything else going on with you the last couple of days, Rick?
Not nothing that I can think of.
All
Well,
right.
of course, last week I was, as you know, in Saskatchewan, so
Mhm. Yeah.
it was good being on the show all the way from Saskatoon through my phone.
Yeah. I think Jr. was asking about you on Monday. Was asking if you made it back safe and all that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I didn't get back till like 2:30 a.m. my time, like to my house.
oh,
I was back in Toronto like 11, just after 11. Well, technically, it was above Toronto at 11.
Right.
Way above.
All right. Well, if Tim wants to join us, hopefully he will. But anyways, I think I'm gonna. So, Rick, why don't you go ahead? Granted, I know we've already been talking a few minutes, but why don't you give a formal introduction, and I'll get to what I was thinking about in terms of the conversation topic. Hopefully, that will start some more conversation. Anyways, go for it.
I, of course, am Rick Piper of the illustrious, the courageous Canadian Shield. I mean, Cross Comics. That too. I do comic books. I have several characters. I have 3 books out. One is needing to be reprinted so people can buy it, although they can buy it digitally. And not sure what else to say. I guess that's it for now.
All right. And feel free, of course, to share your link if you'd like, Rick. All right. So one of the things, let me get into something I was thinking about. Here we go. Here's Tim. Hey, Tim.
Yo,
Popping in.
what are we talking about?
Well,
We're talking about you and how ugly you are.
No.
Whatever, Mr. Chunky.
Anyways, if you want to give a quick little intro for yourself and talk about any your projects or anything like that.
Hey,
Tim?
Woody, what's up? Creator of Melvin, third campaign is launching July 29th, so you know what it is. Also, I will be appearing at Authorpalooza this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also,
what exactly is Authorpalooza? So
it's a little event for local writers and such, and it's at the trolley station right next to the library.
All right.
And what city is that?
That would be Middleton, Idaho, my friend.
And if you would like to share the link, you can, Tim. I believe you have a wrench. I believe.
Yeah.
It's in Middleton, Idaho.
Well, you said it. You are. I'm kidding.
All right. Anyways,
it's all love.
Yep. Anyways, okay. So one of the things I was thinking about, towards the end of last week here, one of the things I was thinking about that I was thinking about. Now, have you guys ever noticed? Granted, it's a little bit changed now in terms of modern comics, but now you guys have been on with me for my historical comic retrospect before. You guys have co-hosted.
We have.
Yes, you have. But have you guys ever noticed how a lot of the heroes, whether they're in their alter egos or what have you ever noticed how, in terms of their professions, they're like the they tend to be in the upper echelon of socioeconomic status. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Like, reporters, billionaires,
you mean rich?
Well, not necessarily rich. Not like now. Some of them are. Yeah, some of them are. Some of them are like independently wealthy, but they're usually either independently wealthy or they're as Rick was pointing out, they're kind of like in a white collar professional field, like being a reporter or a doctor or for the most part, it's not and then here's a link to Tim's site, one of them
page.
Yeah, sign up page. They're either independently wealthy or they're basically a white collar worker, somebody who's in more of a professional field of employment, or they're self-employed. In other words, for the most part, I mean, I'm not saying that it's exclusively that. I mean, I know of some examples of some that are at the lower end of the economic scale too. But for the most part, if you go back in time, they tend to be at kind of the upper half of the half of the socioeconomic, either in their society they're in that, or depending upon what their society is, they might be like they might have a higher socioeconomic status, like Namor or Sheena kind of thing.
Yeah.
They kind of go.
I've noticed that they there's a lot of standing around and talking rather than action. I've noticed that they shove, like they'll have have narrations where they just kind of shove in a narration right in there. That's kind of forced and out of place. I've noticed that their stories seem to be rehashing the same crap. I've noticed that we are back to having only two choices, which is Marvel and DC, and sometimes Image. But basically, Marvel and DC.
No, we're not talking about modern. I'm not talking about modern comics.
He's talking about the stuff that we've read on, the retrospect and that.
Oh, you're talking about, okay, so
I've noticed I'm talking about like historically, I'm talking about historically. I'm not talking about the modern stuff. I even said that at the beginning. I don't know.
I missed that part.
Okay, well, I'm talking about when you go back in time, when from what we've read through the retrospect. One of the things I've noticed, this is something I was just kind of thinking about the other day, is that a lot of the heroes, now not every hero, mind you, there are some, they tend to, a lot of the heroes, whether in their actual, whether they have alter egos or not, many of them have a secret identity alter ego. Some don't, like Zatara, for example, is Zatara. He doesn't have a secret identity. But whether that or whether they do have a secret identity in their secret identity alter ego form, they tend to have like professions and stuff that's more in the upper echelon or upper part of the socioeconomic scale. As I was pointing out, they're either independently wealthy, they're in a white-collar position, kind of a white-collar profession, or they're self-employed. Again, it does not say that there aren't heroes that even back in the golden age that were maybe struggling a little bit more financial or may not been as well off. I mean, an example of that is Mr. Scarlet and Pinky and this is another link that Tim has up. I guess
that's to the actual campaign they'll be launching July 29th.
All right. So,
I've noticed that I noticed that, I guess, but what I've noticed is mostly the type of villains they fight are very limited, and it's always centered around like some gangster doing something or some secret weapon that's been stolen kind of thing.
Yeah, which was a thing back then. Hey, JR.
Hey, JR.
Yeah, Norman was everything was pretty much the same story.
Well, yeah, again, the mafioso was kind of a big thing back in those days,
Yeah, and they hadn't developed the supervillain as much as they had today.
Right. Well, they didn't actually start developing. It's kind of funny because they didn't actually start developing, rogues galleries, where almost every character had a pretty deep rogues gallery until they didn't start developing that until the Silver Age. Because in the Golden Age, like if you look at DC, and now DC is the one I would know most about, of course. DC, like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman did have a pretty deep rogues galleries where they'd have a rogues gallery that would be in the double digits. And then maybe your second tier guys like Flash and like
Hawkman
Hawkman, Flash, Hawkman, Green Lantern. They might have like 7 to 10 rogues, and then when you get down to the kind of the church, some of the guys like Starman, like Dr. Midnight, like Dr. Fate, they may have only had 3 to 5 rogues. So
Yeah, that we can think of offhand, anyways.
Also, the villains had more of a backstory in modern ages versus them. They, you like the Mad Monk. Did you really know anything about him? No, he was just a mad monk.
right.
You know,
But like one, as I was saying though, one of the things I was just thinking about that I noticed quite a bit was how how many of the when they were originally created and developed, many of the heroes in their alter egos were were seemingly in that kind of upper half of the socioeconomic status range. They were, as I said, they were either independently wealthy, they were in a professional form of employment, or white collar type employment, or they were self employed. And some examples I would give, like for examples, let's look at the Action Comics. Some of the characters that we know were featured, well, that I know were featured in Action Comics. For example, you had Superman, who was Clark Kent. He was a reporter.
Yeah, and back in that day, reporters were thought way more of. Today, it's a little bit of.
Yeah, they were, you would see them dressing more professionally. They were always in a suit and tie, white collar, all that. Before I continue here, let me just catch up on some chats here. Let's see, good to see you, Jr. Jason is asking, someone look up what Jilfgest poison is. I have no idea. We're doing something else right now, and Hail Xenu, his warrior bride. Xena, his warrior bride. Okay, but anyways,
okay.
Yeah, like with Clark Kent, that he was a reporter, and he was considered more of a white collar professional type. You had Zatara, who was a stage magician. He basically self employed, and I know that you both have read. I know Rick, you read some Zatara with me because I know you had some criticism on that one story where he went to the other dimension. But
well, I wouldn't. Although he was a magician and a high-ranking magician, I wouldn't consider him necessarily upper echelon, upper society. I'm not sure how you would mean that, sort of.
Well, okay. The thing is that the way he'd go about himself, people first, it's like, okay.
Although he was very respected.
He would have had to do some kind of work. He, obviously, right?
Yeah.
In order to support himself. I mean, we've seen in stories where he'd have he'd be in apartments where they'd be a bit more upscale as compared to. So he probably was he was probably like more of a stage magician.
Yeah.
He may not have been quote unquote rich.
Bruce Wayne rich, but
but he was still well off for himself. That in other words, he wasn't poor, but he wasn't rich, but he was still kind of in a manner to where he probably made he was pretty as a stage magician, which was part of his thing. Stage magician with real sorcery.
I will say this: I can see why EC comics in the 50s were a pretty big deal. They seem to be a little more exciting. You always had somebody doing something wrong, and then it would come back to haunt them later, or they would get what's coming to them, or there was always something kind of out there.
Didn't Gil guess poison from the world of Warcraft?
I have no idea.
I don't either. Like Jimmy Olsen of the Daily Planet. Well, yeah. Well, Jimmy Olsen. Well, okay, that's more Silver Age. Jimmy Olsen was initially when he was first introduced, and Woody, you know this because you probably remember when we were doing that episode where we did cover that. He initially started out as a copy boy in at the Daily Planet, and then eventually became a photographer. But again, that would have been still considered more of a white collar profession.
Yeah, but even as a professional photographer, it would have been the lower end of thing. He wouldn't have been considered in the same ranking as
Clark. Right.
Yeah,
Clark or Lois. Right.
Well, wasn't he originally a sidekick character, pretty much?
Oh, he's always, for
He's
the most
always
part,
been a sidekick. I mean, even when they were, even when they were having him do the superhero stuff as part of the superhero, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen books, right? Where it seemed like every issue every other issue or whatever, he'd be getting some kind of strange new superpower for that particular issue. Like,
yeah,
like
he'd
becoming
be
a
like
giant
a
sword
Z.
or-
He'd end up being like a Z-list hero.
Yeah, but yeah, but like, okay, like as we were saying with Zatara, he probably made a comfortable living on, not on both his stage magician work and as an adventurer too, because sometimes people would call him in to like solve cases or what have you.
Yeah, but the question is, for calling him in to solve cases, would he get any money for that, or is that just?
I don't think he was getting money for that as much, but
Yeah, because
but
we never see him getting any
you
money.
still
That's
got the
why.
impression that he was still fairly well off for himself. That's where I was going with that. Tex Thompson. Now, Tex Thompson is an interesting character in that he had three very distinct aspects to his run when in Action Comics. Initially, Metal's here. Hey, Metal.
Hey,
Yeah.
Metal.
So
you know what it is, Metal.
JR says so. It's Dutch, not Danish, for poison. Oh, Gilgas seems to be a Dutch translation for poison gas.
Hey, Metal, what's up?
No, not much. Just running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
Everything okay with what you were telling me the other night? I guess you're in your place at the end of the month then, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. Well,
What are you moving?
Soon.
What we were discussing, what we've been discussing here the last few minutes, Metal, was one of the things I brought up that I was thinking about recently the last few days here is how in the Golden Age, in a lot of the stuff that we've been reading from the Golden Age and stuff, how a lot of the heroes in their alter egos, or even not in their alter egos, like in the case like Zatara and other magicians and stuff like that, but a lot of them seem not all of them obviously, but most of them seem to be in the like upper part of the socioeconomic status scale. The point I was making, how a lot of them were either independently wealthy or in like a white collar professional type employment or self-employed. And I was just going over, like some of the examples from Action Comics that we were, I talked about Superman and Zatara. I was just talking about Tex Thompson, how Tex Thompson had three distinct aspects to his career during his run in Action Comics. His initial was him more as what I often call the Playboy adventures, and there are other characters like Barry O'Neill, who's another one. I know Barry O'Neill is probably not one you guys have heard of, but where you have these guys who would at least the appearance would be they come from money. You're just not sure exactly how they come from money. They think the idea being the independently wealthy types, right? Tex Thompson is one of those, and it was later elaborated on that Tex Thompson, of course, his money came from oil because he was from Texas and all that. Some of the other characters from Action Comics include like the Black Pirate, John Valor. Now, again, you classify him like kind of self-employed because being a pirate, he made his living on the sea, as a pirate, finding treasures and all that. You have Congo Bill, who was a jungle adventurer / explorer, make his money as a guide. And they even indicated in one of his stories that he was a pilot during World War I. And then you have, of course, Vigilante, who was a traveling singing cowboy, again coming from Hollywood. So, I would just, and then even with some of the stories that we were reading the other night, like what Dean Denton, science detective. He was a actor who also would be a private detective who'd use science as metal. We talked about with metal. We've had characters like that too. I thought that would be a good, and we can continue the conversation. But now that Metal's here, I want to give Metal a chance to introduce himself, plug anything he'd like to plug, and we can take a few minutes to go over what we went over on Friday, and then we'll get back to the discussion we were just having on the socioeconomics of the Golden Age superheroes. So, Metal, you want to introduce yourself and talk about yourself a little bit?
Okay. I'm the Middle. I create a publication called X Dynamis Chaos, which has a mix of long and short form comics, mostly web comics, and some web novels as well, similar to pulps. And I also host a show called the Vomitorium 2 times a week that covers all kinds of random topics, mostly video games, because that's what most of the news is, but films, comics, other things as well.
Yeah, and feel free to share any links if you'd like, Metal, as well. Okay, so this past Friday, of course, Metal was my co-host, as you guys know. We went over books that went on sale in October of 1939 from Centaur Publications, including Amazing Man, number 7, Amazing Mystery Fun. The features we went over included like Amazing Man, Speed Centaur, Dean Denton, Science Detective, and Arrow. And there were some pretty interesting stories. Amazing Man was probably the main. Amazing Man and Speed Centaur were probably the main quote unquote superheroes. And in terms of what we were just talking about now, with you had Amazing Man. I don't know. Don't know. They have yet to show him, in an alter ego. He's known as a Mon. And I explained this to Metal. I don't know what was one of you two who last was with me on that, but he was Amon, the Amazing Man, who was created by Bill Everett, was raised by monks. Speed Centaur, being a half man, half horse, pretty self-sufficient. Dean Denton being kind of an actor, who also would be a private detective who'd use science to
solve crimes.
Yeah, solve crime. Metal, you want to give your impressions on what we read from Friday? Now that I've kind of given some details there.
I'm trying to remember. A lot's happened since Friday. I remember I really liked the Dean Denton story. I thought that one was really good with its characterization and pacing. And the other stories were kind of fun, but they just felt very average by comparison from a writing perspective. Artistically, they were all pretty consistent with the era. I really, really liked the way coloring was done back then, where they had to actually work within the limitations of their printers, but everything was so vibrant because of that.
Yeah,
it was just a fun experience.
I always found that interesting. At least the kind of you kind of get the idea of what was the time period, in the 30s.
Oh, what, didn't you have anything more to? It seemed like you were going to say more there, Tim. That's why I didn't.
Yeah, hold on. So that's what I found interesting is like it really reflected the era it came from. Organized crime was a big problem, so a lot of the villains were organized criminal mobsters. I just felt like the storytelling was even though it's the early years, it was pretty limited to that.
Yeah. Well, also though, we as Metal can tell you, there were actually a couple of recurring villains that the Centaur characters did deal with. In terms of Amazing Man, it was the Great Question, and with Dean Denton, it was the Conqueror. In fact, in the Conqueror's case, and in his case, if anything, his angle wasn't as much organized crime as it were. That's actually one of the stories where he delved off into something a little bit different. It was more like he would masquerade himself as some kind of cult leader to try to trick some of Dean Denton's actor friends into giving him money.
Yeah, which is still
Right.
kind of, a form of organized crime, like he's trying to get money from people. The great question, though,
It's
extortion, sort of, but it's not really, right? It's more like a
it's
fake
not
thing.
extortion. It's a con. Yeah.
Extraction.
Yeah, extraction.
But like the great question, that was more of like one of those actual early supervillains, because like his motive for why he was doing it really wasn't clear. It just felt like he was doing something bad to be bad, but you felt like there had to be a greater motive. It's just, like him, it's supposed to be a question, and it was more of like an over the top like villainry compared to somebody just trying to get money from someone or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing I noticed, is that the villains back then didn't really have much of a backstory. They were they're bad. And the hero had a very kind of like simplified backstory. He does this because this.
But if you're a criminal, right, like it's safe to stick with criminals. If you just want money, you really don't need a backstory, because like it's understandable. Most people just want money, and some people will do bad things to get it.
Yeah, I get that. I'm probably like, since they're all mobsters, that it's probably not that much you can do with a mobster's backstory, really.
Yeah, well, because usually mobsters, they call them crime families, because it's like the family business, as it were, is passed down from generation to generation too. Whether it's the Italian mafioso or the Japanese yakuza.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, you could certainly delve into like in the early years, they were heavily abused. Crime bosses usually grow up in a very violent environment. So
it
depends.
It's only when you have a crime boss with some sort of shtick like the Penguin that you give a backstory to.
Well, I mean, in retrospect, the Penguin kind of represents corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, depending upon the characterization you use for the Penguin too,
Well,
yeah. I guess I'm going more modern day. I'm not sure what he was completely in the Golden Age or Silver Age. When they introduced him.
Well, we'll eventually get there, Rick.
Yeah.
If you ever,
go ahead, Tim.
I said, if you ever seen Psychology of the Batman, they kind of hit on that, where the Penguin represents kind of like a corrupt public figure or a politician.
Yeah, well, they might be going with today because more what he is today. But I'm also thinking, like I remember the Penguin, first time I was introduced to him was, of course, I believe through either Super Friends or most likely the Adam West version of him. So, all of the characters in that just had a bunch of goons and they went for money.
It was a very simple plot line because of what they were. Okay, so Woody goes tuxedo, monocle, cane, cigarette holder.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But it was like, I'm not sure when he was first introduced, whether he was like he was in the Batman TV series or not. So,
well, there was a golden age. I can't remember too much off the top of my head.
Version of him.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I looked it up, but
yeah,
but he was basically Umbrella and all that. So,
and of course, he's just one that we're using as an example.
So, anyways, Metal. Did you have anything more that came to mind on what we were reading from Friday, or?
The Speed Centaur was a very, very weird comic. And I don't even mean the fact that it was centered around a centaur. because that's not the weirdest thing about the comic. It was how the villains were treated, how his own friend was treated. Like I don't know about how Speed treated Real, but it was almost like yeah, I'm willing to possibly sacrifice my friend to lure these criminals here in a way that we can take advantage of them. But more so, it's just like nothing made sense. It's like, hey, we're gonna shoot these rocks.
Oh yeah, that's
crevice.
right.
Like
That's
nothing made sense about Speed Centaur.
Oh yeah, I mean, okay, so in that, and I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch as we were talking about that. So at one point, his partner, Rio, who was a reporter, led the criminals back to Speed's cave, and so what the crime boss did, he stuck a bullet in between a couple of rocks, right? Now get this. He then shoots that bullet, right? And somehow causes an avalanche by placing a metal bullet in between a couple of boulders, shooting it, and ends up causing an avalanche.
Yeah.
Right?
And like I kind of get what the writer was thinking about that. It's like, okay, well, there's going to be an explosion if we actually hit the striking pin of the bullet with the other bullet, which is going to be really hard to do anyway. But like, if that was enough to cause an avalanche, you could have just took like a tree branch or something, or kick some rocks, and that probably would have caused an avalanche too. Like, it was just insane.
And then the idea was them also thinking that they blocked up the hole and trapped Speed Centaur in his cave. Only for, and you want to finish that thought off there?
No, he just lifted up the giant boulder that was blocking the cave and threw it, and basically got them stuck in a smaller avalanche that probably killed every mobster involved. One of the guy was definitely squished under the boulder.
Yeah, so Woody was saying Burgess Meredith, the one and only. Then he trained Rocky to fight. Yeah, Burgess Meredith was the late great Burgess Meredith was the actor, of course, who portrayed Penguin in the 1960s live action Batman series, and then went on to portray Mickey Goldman, who would train Sylvester Stallone's Rocky in the Rocky movies. So.
Yeah, he was also in Clash of the Titans, the original one.
Yeah, and he also they also featured him in an episode of Twilight Zone as well.
Yeah.
What about Jaws? Was he in Jaws?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not
okay,
sure.
Maybe I got mixed up with someone else probably.
Yeah. But with the Penguin, like the the 4 times that he's been portrayed in as live action, he's been really different each time. I think, because obviously you have the Adam West Batman, you have the one from the original, the
Danny
Michael
DeVito.
Danny DeVito. Then you had the most recent one in the Batman, and then of course you had the one from Gotham.
Well, he's been even in some of the animated series. He's been kind of portrayed, drastically differently. In the Super Friends cartoon, his one appearance there, he was kind of depicted as kind of more just a simple crook.
I think
then when you go to the DCAU, in the Batman,
the
series,
Timverse, I love
all that. He was depicted more as initially starting off as kind of a crime boss, and then eventually it's kind of like the kind of like a corrupt businessman or somebody who gives the illusion that he's gone straight, but he's really doing stuff more behind the scenes.
I'd say definitely after Tim Burton's Batman with Michael Keaton and all that, the Penguin's definitely been made more of a mobster since then, and probably I'm not sure whether that was due to either the comics or the Batman animated animated.
Well, actually, though, in 2004, that series, the Batman series in 2004, where well, of course Batman was voiced by Reno Romano and the Penguin was voiced by Tom Kenny. He was actually depicted as basically coming from a family that had ended up losing its fortune. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of made it like a rival to the Pennyworths, which were a wealthy but servant family. Like they were all like a Bannerman family where Alfred came from.
So let's see. What are you saying? DeVito's drooled green like Rick Sanchez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, anyways, going back to what we were talking about before, before we went on here. Basically, the point I was making is that when a lot of these characters were originally created, they were, it's kind of funny how they would place them in the maybe not funny. I think you could, it would make a certain amount of sense because obviously, in order to be able to do what they do, like take such long like the idea of Tex Thompson, right? He'd have to be independently wealthy if he, if in one or two if for one or two issues he's off somewhere in the mountains of Tibet, having to deal with an enemy like the one-eyed Gora in a sealed city, in some secret sealed city, and then next time he's in like England, he's traveling all over the world, he seems to have the means to be able to do that, and then he can, do certain other things too that only a man of significant means would have, right?
Yeah. JR says independently wealthy or a hobo.
Yeah, well, and that's the point we were talking. Well, no, he couldn't be a hobo because the hobos tend to be poor.
Yeah, but what he means is
He's a
hobos
wanderer. Okay, he's a wanderer is what he might be getting at, or somebody.
Yeah.
But
A vagabond.
a vagabond. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy's always traveling, so it's not like he's tied down to a job. Sort of
Listen,
like what
Amon could have been a vagabond because he turned into Green Mist and kept stealing everybody's stuff, so he didn't actually need anything of himself.
Yeah, but but like and like going like okay, so we went over kind of some of the characters that had been featured in action in the early days. Like you go to detective, you see again Batman, Bruce Wayne, independently wealthy. Now early on, like later, I know they fleshed that out a little bit more in modern times, but I don't know. You guys have read some of the Batman stuff with me before, I think, or I've seen some of that stuff. They seem to indicate is that he was independently wealthy. His family, he has like what they call old money. In other words, his family had always been rich, at least since the founding of Gotham or whatever. But they never went into details until later as to how that all came about. I think it was always indicated too that his father might have been like a doctor, like a surgeon or something like that. But
yeah, I think it's been for quite some time that Bruce's dad was a doctor.
yeah. So, but Batman, independently wealthy, Wayne, then you get to like Slam Bradley, who is a private detective, a classic hard-nosed private detective. So he goes into like the self-employed category. Again, not necessarily rich, but still considerably well off for himself. You had Crimson Avenger, who was Lee Travis, who was a newspaper publisher, another kind of white collar professional.
Yeah, but publisher, he'd probably be rich at that point, or fairly well off.
Yeah, he even, if you remember too, he even had a valet who would be his crime fighting partner, Wing, as well there, and he had Speed Saunders, who started out as a government agent who they'd eventually turn into a private detective himself. Again, government agent, and even back then being a G-man, again, maybe not rich, but still, fairly well off. for a public servant.
or definitely respect it,
Right. You know, um,
unlike today.
right. You go over to Adventure, you have the original concept of the Sandman by Burt Christman, Wesley Dodds, who was again independently wealthy. Now, in his case, we don't necessarily know how he came into that wealth, and some of the early stories that indicated that maybe in the early 30s there he was in the United States Army Air Corps, because one of the early stories actually indicated, in fact, in one of the early stories, not only that, but his Army buddies were made aware of his alter ego of the Sandman.
Yeah.
And then late, granted, that's the only story we're covering right now, but some of the other features that would come in Adventure later would include like Our Man, Rick Tyler, who was a pharmacist, again, another professional type, employee.
Yeah, but I wouldn't. He was a pharmacist. They were somewhat respected, but I wouldn't put a pharmacist on the same caliber as, say, Clark as a reporter.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they're all in the. They're
yeah. I know. I'm just saying.
If we were to give it like a numerical score, right? If we were to give it like, well, say independently wealthy might be 100, somebody like Clark might be 80, and then somebody like, as you said, a pharmacist might be something like 60 or something like that. Something in the
Actually, I think a pharmacist would be under.
But they're still in the upper echelon, is what I'm saying. They're in a line of profession that is, status wise, it's more of a respectable thing. It's not like they're like, okay, to draw a certain.
It's not like they're a bag clerk or whatever, a bag person,
right? Okay. To kind of give a comparison here, okay. In Fawcett Comics, one of the key superhero characters or mass vigilante characters of the time was Mr. Scarlet and Pinky. Now, if you guys are aware of those characters, you would figure out that you could argue that they're kind of a poor man's version of Batman and Robin, the way they were presented. Okay, they weren't necessarily wealthy. Let's see. Mr. Scarlet's secret identity was Brian Butler, who was a public defender.
Yeah, well, that's still a lawyer, and depending on your era,
public defender though, not a prosecutor. Public. And the way they depicted him was he wasn't. It's like he wasn't like rich. It wasn't like somebody who was He wasn't in the same. He wasn't like in the same vein as, let's say, the Clock, Brian O'Brien, who during his career he was a retired criminologist.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I get that and all, but I'm just saying, as a lawyer, somewhat depending on the time and all that, could be considered somewhat respectable profession.
But there are certain lawyers,
the most
like
Irish name I've ever heard.
Prosecutors or federal lawyers who would have been considered much more. When we read it, you'll know what I'm talking about, Rick.
Yeah. Well, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, as a lawyer is usually very respectable, even one that defends public. Yeah, sure, he's not rich, but he's probably depending on how far along he's in his career, he might still be getting a respectable sort of money.
I mean, again, the way that this story was depicted back in the in the 40s, the way they were kind of a poor man's version of Batman and Robin.
Oh yeah, I would definitely see him probably as not as having as much money as what's his name, Bruce Batman,
right?
But then again, Our Man being the pharmacist probably would be even lower money wise.
No, I don't think so, because Even
The
though he was
pharmacists make a lot of
he
money,
worked for a
even back then.
pharmaceutical- He was a chemist.
Yeah.
He was a chemist. He was actually one of the guys who actually made the drugs. In fact, if you know enough of Power Man, he was the one who actually originally developed the pill that he would use. The drug that he would use to gain his powers, Miracle.
Like you have to have an MD to have that job.
Yeah. Oh, I get that, but you know, I would say that they probably make a fair amount of money, but I'm not sure what the type of he was a chemist, but if he was just doing like your I don't know,
He was a pharmaceutical chemist. Like
yeah,
another hero from Adventure Comics was Starman, Ted Knight.
yeah,
who was an astronomer. Again, another like professional type employee.
I guess I'm just thinking, like if you're with a chain of pharmacies, you're making probably decent money. But if you're an independently owned one, like a lot of them would have been back then, they probably would have been making.
Well, he wasn't just a pharmacist. He wasn't like your corner pharmacist. He was a chemist. He was a chemist who worked for a pharmaceutical company, which meant he was the one who was actually
R&D
developing the drug. He was creating the drug.
But even a lot of those people don't get a lot. Well, I don't know back then, but
if you're the guy who makes the thing that gets patented, you are getting paid a lot, even back then.
Yeah. So, Tim, you've been relatively quiet on all this. Did you have anything to say on what we were talking about?
Not at the moment. I was kind of like, you guys were mentioning Batman, so I had to kind of look up something.
Yeah. Well, you know generally what we're talking about, right?
Oh, catch me up a little bit. I became kind of enthralled by a psychologist breaking down Batman villains.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that we're talking about like how one of the points I was thinking about recently is that when they were originally created, when a lot of these characters were originally created back in the 30s and stuff, how they seem to be kind of more on the upper half of the not all of them, obviously, but on the upper half of the socioeconomic status scale,
Well, I'd say they still are really, when you really look at most of your heroes.
I think it's become a little more complex over the decades, though, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a lot more, like for example, Static, right? Static from Milestone. Okay.
Some heroes are like
he was a high schooler when he got his powers, right?
Some characters are a target of tragedy. They're usually like middle class characters.
Yeah, but
lower class.
A lot of them still have some decent amount of money, coming in on a regular basis.
Yeah, but a lot of those characters, like some of them, like Static, but
just like you said,
Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning, who's a teacher, again in terms from the economic aspect of it, on the lower end of it.
Yeah, but those are the exceptions to what you were saying. Really, and like you said, there was even those back
to more modern times or Bronze Age times. I'm talking, of course.
But I'm saying even if you compare
looking back the Golden Age, how a lot of those heroes were in. As I said,
you had a lot of. I mean, like in maybe the 80s and 90s, you had a lot of. They used to be soldiers and they became something else, or you had the Punisher who was, a cop and he got killed. They thought they killed him, but he came back as a vigilante and named himself the Punisher. You have somebody like Matt Murdock, Daredevil, who was who grew up in
Hell's Kitchen.
Hell's Kitchen. Obviously, that means he was a lower class individual and became a lawyer. You had somebody like maybe Wolverine who had his who was originally from money and then lost it all and became
he was
a wanderer.
But we're not talking while they're growing up. Really, we're talking once they become heroes.
Well, Wolverine didn't have money. Did Wolverine have a lot of money though?
Well, okay. Plus, we're talking about. I'm talking more about when the characters were
Yeah,
originally created.
yeah.
You know,
But I was
what
just
you guys have been doing the last couple of minutes here. We're jumping ahead to closer to modern times, or what we
Yeah.
grew up, what a lot of us would have grew up with
yeah,
the characters in the 80s. I'm
yeah,
talking about when from what I've seen when I was doing my own research prior to starting the historical comic retrospect on Fridays, when I was reading up more on the synopses of like a lot of the earlier DC stories and by extension Fawcett and Quality and all that.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
the alter, they were in a way they were either independently wealthy, they were in a white collar type profession, or they were self-employed. They weren't
yeah,
like vagabonds. Not to say they weren't vagabond heroes, like as I was pointing out with Mr. Scarlet and Pinky, but
yeah. Well,
the trend seemed to be
yeah.
they were more in the upper. I'm not saying they were rich. But they were in that upper middle class.
Yeah, we get that, Mike. I had just made the comparison that even today it's basically the same. Yes, you have your exceptions.
Well,
like
a
you
lot of the
said.
legacy heroes still are in. A lot of the legacy heroes, like
Yeah.
Clark Kent and still,
Well,
you still
I
are.
mean,
But like for example,
like in the 90s, you had a resurgence of corporation. Like Wildcats. They were funded by Jake Marlowe's Halo Industries or something like that. Or like a lot of the Image characters were either like government, part of a government agency or such. That's kind of a joke about Image in the early days, or like or like Hellboy. Hellboy is part of a secret government agency, I think.
well, you had Azrael as well, who's part of
Yeah.
the Order
Yeah.
of Saint Dumas.
So
Yeah.
there's that aspect. So it's not necessarily just like I said, Rick. It's become more complicated than just like, oh, they're of means, so they can fight crime.
Yeah, I'm just saying a lot of them are still that way, unless you get into something, say like the X-Men, who just get their powers naturally, and then they go fight with.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
X-Men have various backgrounds though too. So
Yeah,
Also,
Yeah, and-
using the word privately wealthy before, the X-Men are wealthy, just not privately.
yeah. Well, I'm just talking about the individuals on the team may not be wealthy. Yes, they're funded.
They have access to the money in the actual manner.
Well, you have to remember.
Yeah.
You have to remember the X-Men. The X-Men was a group that was formed by Charles Xavier. He's the
Yeah.
one who
Yeah.
came from wealth, and then
Yeah.
he used that wealth to start up the
Yeah.
school for the gifted. And you had Scott Summers, Cyclops, who was an orphan. Yeah,
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah, but that'd be no different than the Avengers. The ones that are street level heroes that don't have money, like Spider-Man or maybe Luke Cage.
well, the original Avengers though were, if you think about it, the original Avengers were more like when you look back to the original lineup of the Avengers: Captain America, Ant-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor. Right? Okay,
Right.
Captain America was a soldier in the army.
Well, he wasn't the original lineup, but
Yeah, he was one of those who came in soon after the original lineup. Okay.
yeah.
Um,
But my point is, Tony Stark ends up
as
funding
Dr.
them.
Donald Blake, and he was a doctor. Iron Man, Tony Stark, an industrialist, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Incredible Hulk, a government scientist.
Yeah, well, the Hulk, depending on which version you're going with him, he might be on the run. He might not be having money.
We're going with the original version here. He, when he was originally made, he was. Yeah, you're right. He was on the run. But
But my point was the Avengers were eventually funded by Tony Stark, and any street level hero that didn't have money had access to that. So they're not. They're privately funded, but they're public or private. Some of them are funded by somebody who's rich, but they're probably
I just
poor
my
themselves.
my point in bringing this all up, though, is just the fascinating. As I was thinking about, was how fascinating it is when you look back to those golden age heroes, and you do see a bit of their, the ones that you do have a little bit more background, and see that they were, you had a lot of professionals in there, right? You had a lot of, some of them were independently wealthy, some of them were self-employed, and then as I said, going back with the DC, we had a number of scientists there, and even in adventure comics that go a little bit more, you had, like Shining Knight, who would eventually work, when he was brought to the 20th century, he'd become like, he'd work in a museum. I think he was a curator. You look at Flash comics, the lineup there. Jay Garrick was also a chemist, a police chemist.
No, that was Barry.
Well, actually, yeah, but okay, maybe he wasn't a police chemist, but he was a chemist. Maybe he was a chemistry professor. Okay.
I forget what he was, because I know he just got the, the power of the, Mercury, the god Mercury.
Well, Jay Garrick, he got his powers from being exposed to hard water vapors.
Okay.
He had a very similar accident to Barry Allen, even before Barry Allen was even a thought. So, but yeah, so, but with all that, Jay Garrick was probably a chemistry professor. I thought, though, he did some work for the police as well. But Hawkman was a curator. Carter Hall was a curator in a museum. Yeah. Again, another professional type employee. One of the few what you might call vagabond type heroes from DC was Johnny Thunder. Now him having the Thunderbolt, a lot of his adventures would be more dumb luck. He'd capture the bad guy via just simply dumb luck. And he wasn't somebody who could really hold down a job, because he was not considered as where a lot again. In terms of the socioeconomic, a lot of the superheroes of the Golden Age, aside, they were not just economically and socially, but also, if you think about from an intelligence standpoint, they were average to above average intelligence for the most part. You had some geniuses like Terry Sloan, for example, but Johnny Thunder was kind of a dunce. He would usually get the bad guy a lot through dumb luck, but he would call him one of the few quote unquote vagabond type heroes. He'd go from job to job kind of thing. You'd have also in there, you'd have the Whip, Rodney Gaynor, who was a ranchero. Now rancheros were kind of for that particular era were still pretty, you owned your own ranch, it was kind of considered upper middle class kind of thing, and then you have a character called King Standish, who was kind of a stage magician type character, master of disguise, actor, stage magician. Again, more upper middle class type character. My overall point is that, like, many of the characters, not all of them obviously, but many of the characters were kind of upper middle class to wealthy. Whereas nowadays, you compare it to nowadays, you do, as Tim pointed out, you do have more of a general mix where you do have more people who might be considered like lower middle class to poverty level. You have a lot more like street based heroes, or inner city type heroes like Static Shock,
Well, I don't think you have a lot of them anymore. Well, a lot of them. I think it's about the same as it was before. percentage wise. Unless you, like I said, unless you get into a group, unless you count groups like the X-Men where they just go recruit somebody that's got mutant powers or whatever, no matter what social, their financial status,
Right. Well, essentially, from a financial standpoint, the X-Men were essentially funded by Charles Xavier.
Yeah, we were saying that, but I'm talking about the individuals on the team. You can count them as a team or individuals. Individually, a lot of them are poor. They happen to be funded by somebody that has a lot of money, so they can do a lot.
The X-Men. But again, in all fairness, the X-Men didn't come about till the Silver Age. We're talking more about the
yeah,
Golden
but I think right now we're doing more of a comparison between the Golden Age and modern day. I think that's what we've come into doing, because I agree with you.
I
A
mean,
lot of
is there really anything much to the Golden Age except for here's some comics with, you got villains that have no really that much of a backstory or a character with very simple motives.
Yeah,
well,
but
you'll
we're just talking.
You'll see that over time. That's the whole point of the historical comic retrospect. Because remember, guys, I've done this on kind of a smaller scale. Like right now, we're doing like all the companies, right, that were developing over that time. When I did it on my own,
Yeah,
I
you just did DC.
I was doing DC and companies that were linked to the, companies that were picked up by DC, like Fawcett and Quality. Okay, I saw some things when I was reading, when I was looking into all those, when I was reading the synopses and getting into the into the beginnings of DC and all that. I saw some stuff that I thought was fascinating. I thought would be more fascinating, and I looked as I go through the stories and go through the synopses and stuff like that. I thought, the thing that made me do like the more broader spectrum of all the comics was, okay, well, if this is going on in DC, I'm sure a lot of the same type of growth and evolution of comics is going on in other companies as well.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be a very fascinating look to go through this and watch how these companies, how these worlds would evolve and develop over time.
Yeah.
Yes, right now where we're at in late 1939, yes, a lot of the stories are heavily influenced with the mafioso, because that was what was going on at that time period.
Well, also
comics seem to be a product of their era.
Yeah, and another thing I also noticed is that they really tried so hard in the late 30s to avoid mentioning any talks of the war in Europe.
Which what I can tell you for certain, when we do get into the 40s, okay, when we get into the 40s and we get into the period of World War II, that will drastically change. That will drastically change. You'll still have quite a bit of mafioso type stories, but you'll start seeing more.
That's going to be interesting.
Style stories when we get into the 40s.
That's going to be interesting between like 1939 and 1942. The kind of the change, like, oh my god.
Yeah, and we're going to see, and that's the whole point of the historical. We're going to watch as
and we have
you'll see it particularly more in the quality stuff. I can tell you that.
There was a story though that kind of hinted that some creators wanted to kind of talk about the war in Europe. There was that one character that went over to Europe to fight the war voluntarily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we also have to remember too, I believe at this point, the war there hasn't been World War II hasn't been officially declared at this point. I think it's
in the states. In 1930,
we want to stay out of it. We want to stay the hell out of it.
When did it start again? Exactly.
Okay. So overall, World War II started in 1939. It started in
late 30s.
Yeah, I know it started in 39, but what
was the official start of World War II in Europe? America did not declare war against Germany until 1941, until after the Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, but what month in 1939. Do any of us know offhand?
I can look that up.
Wasn't it
Yeah,
like? Hold on.
yeah,
Let me
yeah.
let me say something. You're interrupting. Sorry, my bad. No, wasn't Germany like breaking a bunch of treaties? Like they attacked Poland and then they attack another place and they
Mhm.
wasn't there a bunch of wasn't there like a treaty that they signed that they were breaking or something?
Well, essentially, yeah, because if you remember, they were also one of the main protagonists of World War One too. They also were one of the main protagonists. So let's see. I'm on the
I just looked it up. The 1st of September, 1939. So the war has basically just started in the month that you're covering
yeah.
at the moment. So uh, officially or whatever, there's probably been rumors or whatever.
Well, that's really
Why?
weird because there's that one story where there was a submarine from a mysterious nation and obviously it's Japan. So there must have been some stuff going on before
Your
1939.
Japan was already ransacking China and the coast of Asia
There you
prior
go.
to the war, before they joined with the Axis. They were already doing that stuff. They were a bane on the Chinese Korean shoreline.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, because the Chinese and Japanese they don't like each other even
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Some of the things for example, Benito Mussolini became the leader of Italy in 1922. Adolf Hitler in 1933 of Germany. Hirohito of Japan in 1926. So there was a lot of stuff going on even before. As I'm looking at the timeline right now of the events leading up to the declaration of war. There's a lot of stuff that was going on throughout the 19 teens and 20s here. Not that I want to read every single thing, mind you, but basically,
Yeah.
but yeah, war was in Europe. It was officially declared in September of 1939, but there was a lot of stuff going on prior to that.
Yeah, there was all the build up to it.
America was trying to stay out of it until, of course, we got bombed in Pearl Harbor in December of 41, December 7th, 1941.
But that wasn't by technically Hitler or whatever. The Japanese were separate from what I know, but it was made to look like they were in line with Hitler.
Well, the thing what you have to remember is throughout this, I think by the time we got into the war, if as I understand correctly, Japan, Italy, and Germany had formed at that point the Axis powers. So if we're going to declare war on Japan, we're going to eventually have to declare war on Germany and Italy as well, because they were all working together, and that's how we ended up getting signing and getting together with England and Russia to counter them. So.
And Tim was wanting to say something.
Totally forgot what that was now.
But the main point is, we're just in the month where technically the war has just started, so obviously you're not going to see anything about the war yet. You would start to see that probably more in 1940 or 41.
Right. Correct.
Just based on the timeline of when we are, and how ahead they might be in the writing of comics.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, some of the story, well, but then again, it's not always, now granted, we recently read a couple of Western stories that were pretty much almost the same story, just with different characters,
Yeah.
couple of Tex Tyler stories, but, at least in the inner city stuff, right, in the more urban areas, yeah, it was more, organized crime type of storytelling. but then again, back in the 30s, they were. Whereas today, and even when you look at the books themselves, right? Today, most of the books you see are what I call feature books. In other words, they feature one character for the whole book.
Yeah.
The period we're studying right now, the beginning of comics, the golden age of comics, they were written more as anthologies. You had the hodgepodge anthologies where they were doing reprints of stuff of the news, the comic strips of the newspapers, and then the stuff that was producing more original material, like DC and Marvel and Centaur and the like. Now Centaur, a lot of their stuff was a mix of reprints and newer material, but a lot of the newer material was, the superhero stuff was based in the cities, obviously, but you also would have, you'd have like, you'd have Western stories, you'd have Western stories, you'd have sci-fi. Now, not as much sci-fi. Sci-fi developed more in the 50s and 60s, but you'd have some sci-fi, like you had some Buck Rogers stories in there, here and there, but that was more newsprint stuff. You'd have you'd have like jungle adventure type stories. In fact, one of the books we'll be looking at in the near future here actually was called Jungle Comics from Fiction House, and the whole book was an anthology of jungle-based heroes. They had that book, but they also had Sheena being featured in Jumbo Comics as the lead feature in Jumbo Comics as well. So go figure that one out.
Yeah.
But you would have, you'd have spy stories. You'd have a lot more mix back then than
Variety.
you do today. A lot. What they've done with a lot of superhero comics today is they've made them kind of a bit of a mix of stuff of both, superhero and slice of life within the same story. Whereas back in the golden age, you did have more variety, and like you look at the stuff that we were reading the other night, and Meadow can again speak to this as well. We had Amon, who was Amon and Speed Centaur were kind of we had, those were a couple superhero features, and then we get to Dean Denton, who was more of a private detective type character, and then well as, and then the Arrow was another like mass vigilante type character. So we did mix it up. There was and when like the week before when I was covering with RJ, when we were covering some of the stuff in Speed Comics. Now we didn't hit upon Shock Gibson that last time. Shock Gibson is a superhero character, but we hit on some other characters because we're introducing a new book. We had the Champ, who was a sports type. That's another type of story that was popular back then. The sports hero type characters like the Champ and Pep Morgan, who are like Jim Thorpe-esque type characters, who are also fairly popular. Because of course, back in the 30s, what was a big thing back in the 30s? It's still pretty big now, but really had quite a bit of prestige. College sports, particularly college football.
Yeah.
So but when we were in, we had the college sports hero. You had and we read, of course, another Western. You had some private, so you did have more of a mix then. Tim, maybe you haven't been on with me as much when we've covered some of those other genres, but there have been other genres, other storylines that we've developed, and yes, I know even with the sport hero stuff, you could argue that there was some racketeering aspect to that, because you'd have guys trying to fix football games and all that, like they would with but
so I think we've hashed this topic to death.
Well, and that's what I was. I was hope. Yeah, I mean, I was hoping to talk. I was obviously hoping to do this, but I guess I don't need to say every single hero what their professional
Yeah,
occupation was. My
yeah.
overall.
There's too many heroes and too many to list and all that.
Well, I mean, you had Wildcat, who was a boxer.
Yeah,
So I was just, I was just wanting, again, I was just hoping to introduce the topic and then get us into a good conversation about it. And I think we did have a.
yeah. Well, definitely because I think it lasted about an hour here, or maybe an
Oh
hour and a
yeah,
half.
we're an hour. We're coming up on an hour and a half right now. Metal. It sounded like maybe you had something you wanted to say there.
He might have stepped away.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with metal in a few moments. Back to you, Mike.
I thought I heard Metal start to say something. That's why I was stopping to see if he was. But
And now the weather with Rick. Rick?
Whether I say something or not is controversial.
Yeah. So.
Well, God knows you say an awful lot.
Yeah, again, it was just one of those things that when I think about it, it was just kind of fascinating. I mean, again, particularly when it comes to like DC quality, DC and the companies that quality eventually absorbed, like Quality, Fawcett, Charlton. I see how those companies evolved over time, and I figured it was probably the same for some of the other companies that I had covered before that I'm covering now, like Marvel, and I just wanted to touch upon that, how the characters were developed, how initially they started out with many of them being, as I said, the upper tier of upper middle class to wealthy, to where now you do nowadays you do have it more made, like a lot of legacy characters. Yeah, they're still like Clark Kent. Well, Clark Kent at this point might be more like an editor of a paper. Or,
Oh no, he's still the reporter. He's gone from being
some of the Kanan, he actually did eventually replace, like
Perry White,
Perry White and or George Taylor. Okay,
yeah,
Kanan, he did actually, some universes he actually did replace him. So
but I think that was more during the Silver Age,
right? But in the mainstream line, yeah, you're probably right. He's still, but whereas Clark is still a reporter. Okay, Jonathan Kent, his son, not to be confused with his father, his son. Okay, what exactly is his son? His son's what, a high school student? College student, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Well, eventually he should move out of that, and who knows what he'll become.
Even though, like, Bruce
especially
Wayne,
with how the writers are doing it today. But anyways, Tim,
he'll probably become some activist.
Even though Bruce Wayne was a millionaire, what is the most thing that most people identify with when it comes to Batman or his rogues gallery?
The Joker?
Well, think about it. All those characters are broken characters. Batman lost his parents, so that's his motivation to fight crime, right?
Yeah.
And all the villains, they're in one way or the other, they're kind of broken. Like Harvey Dent, for instance, becomes Two-Face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, not all of them per se, because Catwoman.
Oh no, yeah.
Catwoman's a sign of the exact. Well,
she's broken in a way. She grew up in an orphanage.
Well, I guess it also depends on which Catwoman you're talking about.
Well, I mean, the relationship between Batman and Catwoman is interesting.
A lot of that also came later too. Like if you do go back to the original version of when a lot of these people showed up, they were just crazy criminals. They didn't have any like necessary backstory on why they were broken. It's like with Mr. Freeze and his wife, that wasn't added until way later.
Right.
Well, Mr. Freeze wasn't even a character that was. Mr. Freeze, I think, was introduced in the Silver Age. Now, Joker, when he was
had no story. He was just the evil clown guy.
He was a psychotic clown. He was a homicidal clown.
Interesting though, his character, the image, it was based on a character from a silent movie where the guy had a physical deformity where he was smiling all the time. It's creepy. It's creepy as hell though.
But Catwoman was more of a cat burglar slash femme fatale type character in the very beginning.
The psychology behind that is pretty interesting. The modern version, because like Batman has rules, she doesn't, and that's where the attraction is. For
Kind of the
Batman.
opposite of but that's more modern. That
Yeah,
we're
Well, I
talking
mean-
more. In fact, in the golden age, and now in the golden age, one of the other things they did imply is that she may have had some, well, no, actually that might have been Silver Age too, but in the initially they actually had Selena Kyle as the sister of Carl Kyle, who was the original Catman, who was more of a actually no, that might have been Silver Age as well. That might actually
Yeah, because Catman wasn't introduced till at least the Silver Age.
yeah, because
Well, then I guess my
originally in the
favorite-
golden age, as I said before, she was more of a cat burglar,
Yeah.
femme fatale type.
Uh-huh.
No.
Well, I guess then my opinion is that the more modern, not the modern, but what we know of them now is a little more interesting than the original. They've added another layer to it.
Well, yeah, and that's happened over time. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like when I was watching Batman the animated series in the early '90s, it struck me as how some of these characters were different from what I remember, seeing in like Super Friends cartoons and some of the,
A lot of these characters have borderline personality disorders, because it's like this one guy said, Joker's not necessarily crazy. He has an antisocial personality.
Well, which was
he knows exactly what he's doing.
yeah.
He knows
At
it's
least
wrong.
the more modern version does, but a lot of his issues come from the fact that he took a bath. He took an acid bath that not only affected his body but his mind.
Well, I mean, think about though. He knows what he's doing is wrong though. Like the Dark Knight movie, when he didn't have any identification whatsoever, it means he didn't want to be identified, which means he's evading capture.
Well, also too, you have to remember, at least in modern Canaan, day Canaan, the Joker was already a criminal even before he took the acid bath. Because he was actually committing a crime when he became the Joker. If you remember, he was the original Red Hood.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
no. Well, according to the Killing Joke, which actually was not supposed to be canon, but became canon because DC liked it so much. He was a failed comedian, and to get money, he decided to do this one crime that ended up causing him to become the Joker. Yeah, that's the whole point. It's like one bad day, you'll go insane.
Yeah. As for Catwoman, the original one, apparently she was married at the age 17 to a wealthy but abusive Gotham businessman.
There you go. There you go. Right there.
She got tired of the physical and mental mistreatment, divorced him, but he was vengeful and ruined her financially. So to get back at him,
well,
she robbed him, basically, and that was
there you go.
her
beginning.
beginning.
I had actually read some of the early Catwoman stories. There was no indication. When did that happen, Rick? Supposedly, or when did they tell that story?
Well, I read Golden Age Catwoman. It's on some sort of wiki, comicarchives.org. This is just saying her history. It's just saying Golden Age first appearance, Batman, spring 1940. So I guess somebody took all in reading through the comics, put this together, so this isn't obviously going to get all introduced at once. It'll probably be over several different issues.
What I basically can tell you, because I've read some of the Catwoman stories of the from the actual Golden Age. There was no mention of that. They may have what's the word? They may have retroactively added that later, but what I can tell you from reading some of those earlier stories, she was always depicted as more or less a cat burglar who
Okay.
did have a romantic interest in Batman, and then it was eventually revealed that the reason she was initially in fact, in the Golden Age, it was initially revealed that she actually was an amnesiac. She was initially a stewardess, but then when she became an amnesiac, that's when she developed.
In the history section, which the stuff that I basically read was in the first paragraph, and at the end of the first paragraph, it says revealed in Brave and the Bold 197.
Which was Silver Age.
Yeah, but they're showing her in that.
And that was retroactively added. That was added after the fact. That wasn't the story when she originally came out. That was retroactively added.
Yeah,
there's a lot of details that were added like, for example, when they depicted the murders of Thomas and Martha Wayne originally in Detective Comics 33. For the longest time, they never actually revealed the name of the actual criminal. That came about in the Silver Age.
Yeah, well, I won't say retrocons. Like a lot of comics, some of this stuff gets revealed in time. They don't reveal it at first, just for whatever reason. Either they haven't thought of it or whatever. They didn't want to do something. So
okay, but let me because you did add the link. So let me because what you have to remember too is that the people who are adding this stuff retroactively or retconning this stuff. Remember, it was Bill Finger and
Bob Kane
who created Batman. So, for 2 years, Selena operated under the name The Cat.
Yeah. There's this paragraph.
But she was not originally though depicted as. She was just simply depicted as Bob Kane and Bill Finger created her to be. She was initially a cat burglar. None of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, it didn't get revealed at that time. Yeah, it got revealed later because of somebody making it up, obviously.
It was not a case of it was retroactively added. It wasn't retconned.
I'm not sure whether I'd agree it was. I'm not sure whether I'd agree it was retcon because the only is if her thing before that would disagree with it. Would you call it a retcon?
Well, it is a retcon though because that was not what the original creators created. Okay, it was something that was added by somebody else later to add more.
I would argue that they, just like the first Mortal Kombat video game, they probably didn't put too much thought into any more backstory because they didn't think this character was either going to be successful or not. That's usually what happens.
Right. Yeah, well, it's back that time they didn't, as we were saying earlier, back that time they didn't really do any backstory. But come whenever the Brave and the Bold 179 or 97 came out, they decided to give a backstory to the character. That doesn't mean she's retconned. It's just mean they finally decided to give the backstory.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it is a retcon because again, it was not the original.
I wouldn't consider it a retcon myself.
The question is, now that it's been retconned, does the original even count anymore?
Yeah, but there wasn't even anything before that. So how can you retcon something that doesn't exist?
It was retroactively added. That's how come it's a retcon. In other words, by adding it, they actually, even if there was no actual history, they still ultimately changed the character by changing the history, by indicating that she did this because it's also a bit of a retcon because it was revealed later, Rick. It was revealed later that she was an amnesiac.
See if it was revealed later than that, then that is the retcon.
Mhm.
Well, also, I mean, what do you want your these characters to do? So why do you do the things you do? I don't know.
Yeah,
You know,
that's why I don't
what's your
consider
dark origin? What's your dark origin? I don't know.
that's why I don't consider it a retcon, because there was no backstory written. There was nothing to contradict this beforehand.
See,
Okay, it may
this-
not be a retcon, but it was still retroactively added.
I actually got
I could possibly agree with that.
I actually got a new topic. It's more of a criticism. Now, a creator named John Dillard says you have to know everything about your character, right? Well, you should, right? That's the idea.
Yeah.
Well, you
But
should know a lot.
yeah, you should know a lot, but you can't know. You know, there's some things you don't think of right until way later.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, a lot of aliens in Star Wars didn't even have a name or a species name. They were just a background character.
Yeah,
Right.
they were filler.
But the fans themselves made up the name.
Yeah. And
Hello,
hello,
Joshua.
Joshua.
Yeah, hello, Joshua.
But
He's eating popcorn, watching the debate.
And it's a nice, healthy debate at that, right?
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, look at these characters, these well-known Batman characters, right? DC didn't even know exactly. Bill Finger didn't know exactly everything about the character. He created the basics.
He was in the process of creating these characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but my point is, he knew the basics of it, and over time they've evolved into something more.
Yeah. When he probably created Catwoman, it was just, or any of these characters.
Yeah, she was she was an amnesiac who was a cat burglar.
It probably wasn't even that, because he didn't even know that. Because as
Exactly.
Mike said, it was just a woman. It was just a woman cat burglar.
Or like the Joker. The Joker had no backstory whatsoever. He was just a criminal who looked like a clown.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, when they created characters back then, they didn't. I don't think they usually thought of backstory.
Exactly. That's my point right there. That's my point right there. Is like sometimes characters evolve over time. Like, for instance, my character Melvin is evolving more every issue that comes out.
Yeah. And that's going to be the same with the Canadian Shield too.
Shield,
I know the basics that I need to get through, and because every issue, whatever he faces, affects him in some way that changes him, if you will.
That creates a history, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea that you have to know everything about your character, I mean, yeah, you should, but at the same time, you're still thinking of things about it. So I have ideas and concepts I'm working with. I haven't implemented the Melvin Zero will have a lot more, tell you everything you need to know of how he became a mercenary.
Yeah.
And hint at a story before that, and there's going to be more, coming out.
Yeah. Oh, it's just like, we're doing the crossover, and that's going to affect our characters in whatever way that it affects them, learning more about, each of our characters. You reveal stuff.
You're revealing more and more. So, I mean, I'm not done, thinking of stories yet to reveal more of the character.
Yeah. John, I think, goes with a very, like he's already planned out 4 basic issues from the beginning of Buckler's career to his death.
So yeah, of course he has a total package of like, okay, this is what happens like from story 1 to the last part story, and then it's done. There ain't nothing more beyond that. There ain't nothing before that. There's just okay, did that.
Where me and you were having ongoing.
Exactly.
I wanted to show that Brave and the Bold you were talking about, Rick.
Yeah.
That wasn't even written until
March.
That wasn't even written until 2020.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
I was originally thinking it would have been back in the 60s, but apparently no. This particular is from the autobiography of Bruce Wayne, Batman of Earth 2. So this was added. This is retroactively added.
Several decades later.
Yeah.
So this
I didn't know
part of the modern movement. This is something that they just decided to throw in now. This is just more. Okay.
Yeah, so it could possibly be a retcon. It depends on how much it um, affects what's had been said before.
Did it say? So did it say Dollar Comics Brave and the Bold, or just your?
No, well, it's just a thing. It just
That's
said,
it.
it just says revealed in Brave and the Bold 197. But the picture on that cover that you showed for it looks like it could easily be it. The dollar comic was just probably their gimmick. It's just Brave and the Bold 197. They probably had a bunch of dollar comics at the time that they put out like that, just like Batwoman Detective here. You know.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Oh,
so
hey, it's the failed one. The one that nobody liked.
Yeah. And as we look, we see a lot of them there, but they seem to somewhat be reprints of stuff too.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to find some stuff here. Let me.
I don't know. I'd argue to say that Batman characters are a little more relatable in the fact that they're all broken. Certain somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Well, now I mean,
For instance, I'll give you another
interesting.
interesting topic. Two-Face, for instance, he has to flip a coin to make a decision on everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
That has to be in the modern version. That probably has to tie in with probably losing Rachel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that one that you're seeing from 2022 is a reprint. The original one was where is I can't find the year. It was when it was 60 cents, anyways.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can find that one then.
The cover looks basically the same,
Mm-hmm.
except for it does have the dollar comic on it.
Let's see if I can.
Copy image.
Well, there's a few Brave and the Bold.
April 1983 is when it was first. That was what is in the indicia. So
I've been meaning to actually start reading some old Batman stories.
But again, we kind of did get off what I was trying to get at, because I was not necessarily wanting to talk as much about the modern day stuff, because a lot of the modern day stuff is stuff that came later. I was wanting more to talk about what's going on in the golden age when they were beginning. Okay.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Was, and then we get off into this other stuff about.
There's nothing much to go on there. It's they fought crime and they had no backstory.
Well, he's more meaning in their professions, but then I think a natural thing is to compare it to modern era or different eras, too, to see whether it's the same or different. Or
because if we went on the golden age, like so and so does this profession, and that's it. That's it. There's nothing to think about.
Well, there's the basic thought, which is let's analyze it, see how true it is or not, and then let's compare. Right? I would say.
Well, you compare it to the 30s, and it was like, okay, there is organized crime running amok. They're powerful enough to sway our government, so yeah, that's probably why they were.
At least in one of the sites I use, the wiki site I use for the DC database, that's one of the things they did talk about, that a number of the stories, particularly some of the Superman and Green Lantern stories early on, did talk a lot about local and state governments, how corrupt they were.
Right. It was not uncommon for the mafia to actually have people on the payroll that they could bribe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, there's the original cover I got up there for that one, but
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
uh,
I looked it up on the wiki. So yeah, so 83. You know,
yeah,
I was trying earlier to find like the on sale date because that the cover date it came out in cover date of that particular issue came out April. Cover date was April of 83, so that would have meant that when it would have went on sale in
Metal's been
well,
awfully
like in
quiet.
February, maybe January or February of 83. So
yeah. I just know the whatchamacallit, the indicia says April 1983. So
Yo,
that's
Metal, what's up?
the cover date. That's not necessarily the on sale date. That was the cover date.
Yo, Metal, what's up?
Hi.
Oh, okay. He's alive. He lives, y'all. He lives.
Yeah, you probably just didn't want to get into the maelstrom of what we were.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt this riveting conversation.
I
that almost
your
sounds
sarcasm
sarcastic.
is noted, sir.
I guess you're not as entertained by this discussion.
Let me put it this way: I love comics. I like making comics. I like talking about comics. I like reading comics. This is the type of conversation that stops me from visiting the comic store.
Oh,
Yeah, I think we did kind
Well-
of devolve
damn.
into something there.
damn, Metal with the harshness.
No, but that's understandable. I mean, yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily want to get into this too, but sometimes sometimes you just do. It's just the heat of the battle kind of thing.
That's conversation. Well, Metal, what would you like to talk about then?
The more fun stuff when it comes to comics instead of like the pedantics. What makes a character how they are. Like, there was a part at the beginning of this conversation that I thought was way more interesting, and it was less about like when a character started becoming a certain way or whatever. I did like the part where we were comparing how a character was versus now. The problem is these conversations always just get too much into the nitty gritty of like, well, this year and this happened and then this issue and then
yeah.
Yeah, it kind of devolved into that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It was not my intention to do that, but as I said, sometimes you get so caught up in it that you just forget how did we get here.
Well, my argument is like what the character in that particular time period was. They fought crime, and that's it, really.
Yeah, but that was
wasn't
good enough for those people. That was good enough for them, though. That was
Well, yeah. There's no nuance to it. There's just they fought crime, and that's it.
Yeah, well, it was also very much, for the most part, I'd say simpler time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
I think
guys
audience
are good, bad
expectation.
guys are bad. Well, in a way, though, it's not always because, and you guys know this because we've covered this too. There are times we've run across story, because basically the general idea here is that it's always believed that comics generally, or at least the belief is that comics were always generally geared towards kids. And as I can tell you, and as you guys have probably seen yourself in some of the stories we have read, that is not always the case.
Well, people don't remember that like comic books span multiple generations. So how can you say they're just for kids when the audience has grown up with comics?
Right.
Yeah, well, I guess they figure, once you're an adult, you just forget about them or whatever. You don't
And
care
yet
about
there
them.
still are a lot of adults who still read comic books.
Yeah, there's
In
also
fact, In fact, I would wager that if you were, now Rick, you went to a comic convention recently, and so you could probably even tell us this yourself. But I would make the argument or make the suggestion that nowadays the main demographic you're going to find at a lot of comic conventions, which would basically mean your main demographic of the fan base would probably be people who are most, the most people you would have probably likely seen would probably been somewhere between their late 30s and early 50s.
Um, um, yes and no. I've seen quite a bit younger kids. Well, like ones that can, pay for themselves to go somewhere. We obviously got to remember you the only 10-year-olds you see at a con are going to be with somebody, and they're probably not going to be purchasing much stuff. Will be purchased for them, because they have to have their parents or an older brother or sister or something like that with them, because I don't think they're
As
going to be able
compared
to.
as compared to other niche areas,
Yeah.
Yeah.
your
Well,
main group of comic, like comics, you tend to be an older crowd. Comic and toy
yeah.
conventions tend to be more of an older crowd. Whereas if you were to go to an anime or a cosplay or a video game convention, they tend to be more in that 15 to 25 year range. Yes, you do have adults there who are there
Yeah.
accompanying some of the younger kids, but for the most
Yeah.
part, in terms of your customer base, in terms of the people who are actually consuming,
Yeah.
consuming
Well,
the
I would say it probably be.
That's because nobody's bridging the gap.
I was gonna say I'd say it's probably about equal, because there's a lot of adults that grew up with anime manga as well. But again, compared to like a 10-year-old can actually walk into a comic book store. Yeah, not that you're gonna see too many 10-year-old kids walk into a
If they
comic
can
book.
find a comic book store.
Yeah. But or a convenience store or Walmart or something like that where there is a thing where there's books, or a library again where there's this stuff, you know. Your 10-year-old has access to that. Your 10-year-old just can't fork out $45 to go into a con and walk around. They don't have that money. It's their parents that have got to fork out the money to go with them.
Yeah,
Or
but then again, you're not gonna, like I said, you're not gonna have a lot of. I would argue that for the most part, you're not gonna have in most of the niche areas, you're not gonna have anybody younger than 15 attending most cons unless they're going there with like an older brother or like their parents. And
yeah, well, that's
the
exactly it.
point
You
I'm
can't
making here,
you can't have a 10-year-old attending this without somebody older, because 10-year-olds can't afford it, and most parents aren't going to let them go just by themselves.
A
Yeah.
lot of cons won't even let you buy a ticket at the front door if you're not like at least 13 or something. Like a lot of them will even ask for ID. Like some of them is like you have to be 18 to purchase everyone's passes.
Yep.
Yeah, there's that too.
I don't know about you guys.
my point, when I was going to anime cons more back like 10, 15 years ago, right? And I went to I realized that the main, not to say that there weren't, like, because I was like 28,
Yeah.
I was in my late 20s, early 30s at the time, and not to say that there aren't those there, but what I'm saying, generally speaking,
Yeah.
the main demographic, in other words, the people that you're most likely going to see at certain cons, like what I would say, the most of the people that if you were to walk through a convention, if you walk through like an anime, video game, maybe even borderline the tabletop gaming, and cosplay conventions, if you walk through those and you look around, you observe, you're going to probably find a lot of people who are, your main demographic that's going to be there is going to be 15 to 25.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would actually 25 would be more of the one I would pick. Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, let's say for more like your comic book conventions, your and your like toy conventions and your sci-fi conventions, those are going to be maybe a little older. Those are going to be maybe 30 and up. The toy conventions, a lot of those are classic toys or stuff like we would have grown up on, like with the old the old Transformers toys that Hasbro was coming out with, or GoBots or what have you. That's going to appeal more to like our generation.
Yeah. I get you there. Now I can't really compare, I guess, because I've never been to an anime con. You've been to both, but I'm just
That's
saying
what I've
from
mostly been to.
I can't say. I'm just saying from my perspective. I think you're gonna see all ages at them both. Maybe I'm wrong. Because
Yes,
like
I would agree. I would agree on that as a general statement. What I'm talking about,
yeah,
is if you were to walk through the con
yeah, I got
and
that.
you were to observe the main I'm not saying that
I was just at a con this
all
year.
of these are obvious all ages. All of
Yeah,
these are all ages. Okay.
yeah. I get that.
You will find 30, 40, and 50-year-olds at anime conventions who actually legitimately like anime. And you'll find, you will find some 15 to 25-year-olds at comic conventions.
Yeah,
Obviously, manga being part of that. But
yeah,
what I'm generally saying is
yeah.
that the
The ratio of
the ratio
yeah,
of
yeah,
who you're going to find.
yeah.
I think it
You're
also
not going
depends
to
on
find more
the
15 to
size of the con.
25-year-olds at like the
Yeah,
anime
Exactly.
cosplaying. You're going to find more the older crowd at the comics. And
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
size of the con is going to
yeah,
depend on which of those crowds are bigger, right? So if you're going to like a local comic book convention, you're probably going to find more of the older people in general, just because that's going to be the larger crowd for that. But if you go to like the mainstream stuff, like a bigger Comic Con, where like comics kind of actually almost take a back seat to it now, you're going to find more of the younger like cosplayers and artist alley people and stuff like that, and people coming in for autographs or media. It's going to be not just population size, but like how mainstream the con is going to depend on what the audience is.
yeah.
And
I was just gonna go. I think the ratio would be about the same, but I could be wrong. For no matter what
Well,
the
I mean, you also like the smaller the con, the more the special guests are not separated from the main part.
yeah, or if they have special guests at all.
If you notice, like I went to the Gem State Comic Con this year, and they didn't have a special section for special guests. They were kind of mixed in with the different booths. So like the voice actress who did Rita Repulsa was in like that side of the building, but mixed in with like was a guy who did Prince, and right next to her was some lady that used to be in Home Improvement. The one that announced Tim the Toolman Taylor.
Yeah,
Yeah. So they really
Heidi.
didn't. Yeah, Heidi. Yeah, I think it was Heidi. So you didn't really have but most of it was just like knick-knack stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody made their own patches or something.
we're actually just past the 2-hour mark, guys. We had a pretty good conversation. Kind of a little livelier than I had intended it to be, but
Oh yeah. We all have very strong opinions about comic books.
Yeah.
and unfortunately, one of my personality quirks is I just feel at times like I gotta explain something. It's like I can get too caught up in the battle trying to prove my point or whatever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but I think that's anybody, I guess. But anyways, was there anything else you guys want to talk about, or shall we just go ahead and start winding down here?
Let's wind down, huh?
Yeah. Winding down sounds good.
All right, because we've been at this for 2 hours, and I think we had a pretty good conversation there. That's what I was hoping.
Metal was quiet, taking notes about us. Like these people are insane.
Is that true, Metal?
Oh,
like-
trust me, I'm probably the most insane person here, just for completely different reasons.
I see. Good to know.
Yeah, but as Seal put it, well, we're never gonna survive unless we get a little crazy. Anyways, so today, this weekend is May 13th and 14th, 2023. So let's take a look back at this day in niche, or this weekend rather, in niche history. First off, we're going to go back to yesterday, of course. The first thing we will take a look at is from 10 years ago. On this date, 10 years ago, yesterday, or on yesterday's date, 10 years ago, WWE held its Monday Night Raw event from the BOK Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was the Go Home Raw Super Show before the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. The main event of the show saw AJ Lee defeat Natalia with Great Khali and Hornswoggle in their corner. Jack Swagger, who is currently Jake Hager in AEW, with Zeb Coulter in his corner, defeating Big E Langston. John Cena and Team Hell No defeated The Shield in an elimination match with let's see, Daniel Bryan eliminated by a pinfall. Seth Rollins. So I would guess then John Cena was the survivor of that elimination match. The Miz defeated Heath Slater. The Primetime Players defeated Tons of Funk. What? Sounds like somebody wanted to say something there? Or?
No, I just hiccuped a bit.
Yeah. As Woody said, history. Yeah. That's right. All right. So on this day, 10 years, on yesterday's date, 10 years ago, of course, Monday Night Raw from Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Go Home Raw to before Extreme Rules 2013. Now, going back 5 years ago, yesterday, the 20th and penultimate episode of the 29th season of The Simpsons premiered 5 years ago yesterday on Fox. The episode was titled "Throw Grandpa from the Dane," which was a play. The title was a takeoff on the film "Throw Mama from the Train." The Simpsons wake up to find the house completely flooded with water. It is revealed that the night before, Marge asked Homer to help her readjust the position of their sailboat painting. However, they accidentally knocked a nail through one of the water pipes, causing the flood. Well, that was the gist of that. So the episode "Throw Grandpa from the Dane" premiered 5 years ago. Let's see. WTF, this day in history. Totally random wrestling. Well, hey, I cover all things niche, JR. I cover anime, cartoons, comics, manga, and pro wrestling. All subjects have traditionally been considered niche.
Many not so much anymore.
Yeah, they're now more nowadays. They're more mainstream. They're considered more mainstream. Yeah. But traditionally, these topics, I group them all together and call them niche to give them like that one group saying, so that I don't have to say anime, cartoons, comics, manga.
He could be really vague about it and say
single time, because that could be so rare. Right?
He could be really vague about it and say this day in history shit happened. Goodbye, folks.
Well, that would then imply we're talking about general history,
Yeah, exactly. But you get my point, though. This day in niche history, stuff happened. Bye.
But anyways, so now on this day, 20 years ago, the last piece of now this series is still ongoing, of course, started all the way back in 1987. But on this day, 20 years ago, the 115th issue of Betty and Veronica Double Digest magazine went on sale from Archie Comics on this day. It sold for $3. Now, the reason it was so expensive, $3.59, is because it was 192 pages. Wasn't like your normal comic book.
Oh, I love the Digest library. All the Archie Digest stuff is great. And it's a good deal for what you get,
Yeah. Well, also, and it is a lot smaller. It
might be a fun read.
Yeah, it's about almost the size. It's a little bit smaller than a manga collection size.
It's like a TV guide almost.
Didn't they also have a digest for like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Archie version?
Possibly. They have a lot of digest and double digest for Archie for different characters.
They were basically trying to match the Reader's Digest, which was also about the size of a TV guide. It was things that you could put in your rack next to your toilet and read while you were stuck on the pot.
Nice way of putting it there, Mel. Yeah. Well, speaking of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and somebody did mention that, there was I guess, and I think I covered this the other day. Boom Studios and IDW are doing a crossover series between Mighty Morphin, Power Rangers, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And one of the reasons that the stories came about was because apparently there's been a bit of a, because I guess they are, so I guess the turtles in the story are using hollow projectors that are similar to the one Nightcrawler used in X-Men Evolution. And I guess there's a big hoopla because they were basically turning the human identities they would have as, into
All black. All
Yeah.
black.
Yeah, all black. When there's a big debate on whether or not they should be white or Asian or what have you, but there was a huge stink about that too. But anyways, with that, guys, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. I know we got a little raucous at times, but it had
Nothing for today's date.
Huh?
Were they
The last thing was the Archie Double Digest.
Oh,
was.
okay.
I know I kind of muffed up a couple times because the first two were 2013. I said, I initially said today instead of yesterday and all that, but the first two were from yesterday's date. The last one was from today's date. So,
okay.
So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Hope to see everybody back here tomorrow as we get back into covering more niche news. Covering more articles and stuff. And of course, Rick, you're with me this Friday for the historical comic retrospect. We'll be continuing our look through October of 1939, looking at books that went on sale from Fox Feature Syndicate, including, of course, Mystery Men Comics. Let's see, Fantastic Comic. Actually, we'll be debuting Fantastic Comic as well as Wonder World Comics. We'll be debuting the character of Samson from Fantastic Comics. So probably reading some Blue Beetle as well, and and maybe Fiery Mess. Just figuring out which characters we'll be doing. And I'll send you the material because I know you like to preview stuff as well. So I'll send you the material we'll be reading once I decide on that. I'll do that tomorrow. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for being here. Hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.